on the speakers list and I went past him. He's hurt by that.
Don't kill yourself.
Don't kid yourself. You don't want to think that we really like you, Tom.
Don't even bother raising your hand.
We're live. You can go ahead. Mr. Chair, we're live. You can go ahead and
Okay,
start.
so I guess we're on. This is, I don't see any pictures or anything, but we are on. And is it confirmed that we're on the Zoom meeting, Megan?
Yep, so you can call us to order.
Okay. I call the meeting to order, and this is the meeting of the Mission Fulfillment Committee of the University of Minnesota Board of Regents. Well, there we go. I see us on the computer screen now. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for those who are joining us via the live stream video and those attending in person with us here on the Twin Cities campus. As you can see, some of us, myself included, are participating in the meeting in person, and others are connected virtually by video conference. So in this new hybrid format, our protocol will still be similar to our previous electronic meetings. Let me quickly refresh you. We'll continue to keep everyone muted to reduce the background noise. If you wish to ask a question or make a comment, use the raise hand feature within Zoom or alert OBR staff. Ms. Flatten will keep a speakers list for me. And I hope I remember to ask her for who's on the speakers list. When I call you, please unmute yourself. Finally, I'll remind everyone that today's meeting is open to the public. It is live streamed, and the video will be archived on our website for later viewing. Before we turn to our agenda, I would first like to welcome our student representatives, and I don't see them on my computer, but they may still be out there. And I'm going to ask them to briefly introduce themselves. So Student Representative Tojo Garcia, if you are here, do you want to just say hello and you're back for another year and just give us a 1-minute introduction to yourself?
Of course. Thank you, Chair Anderson. Hello, everyone. My name is Rodrigo Tojo Garcia. I use pronouns like he and him. I am a third-year political science and Arabic student, and in my spare time, I enjoy baking and cycling.
Thank you. Our other representative, and I believe you're new, is our student representative, Ali. And do I say that right? And if not, you can correct me. And I'd like you to tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my name is Abdullah Ali. I'm a student at the University of Minnesota Duluth. This is my 4th year attending UMD. I'm just really happy and very glad to be representing UMD here today. Thank you.
Let me just ask you, Mr. Ali, did you know Regent Kenyana when he was up in Duluth?
Yes, actually, I did. I served in.
I was afraid of that. I was afraid
government.
of
It took him a while to answer, though.
I didn't know if you could answer. Thank you anyway. Thank you anyway.
I planted him, Mr. Chair.
Nah, he's a great guy.
Let's turn to our agenda. The first item today is a discussion of the committee's work plan for the year ahead. Regent Davenport and I have worked closely with Provost Croson over the summer to develop this plan. Regent Davenport will be joining us later in the meeting, but in our discussions in preparation for today, we wanted to share these framing comments, and then I'm going to ask Provost Croson to walk us through the work plan. Regent Davenport in particular, and myself wanted to point out 4 specific features of this year's work plan. The work plan is aligned with the university's system-wide strategic plan. Our goal, number 2, is to have a robust discussion about big topics. The third point, you will see that this committee will focus on a limited number of topics each meeting. That is intentional. We heard from you a desire to have deeper conversations on topics and more time to accommodate them. Finally, you will see that we organize topics for the committee within specific themes. Students, diversity, and faculty are a few of those examples. So you will see alignment with big topics, focused discussion, and a thematic approach. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Provost Croson. Provost Croson?
Thank you, Chair Anderson, members of the board. So I just want to highlight a few things about this work plan. As Chair Anderson mentioned, as you look at the plan, under each bullet point, it indicates what element of the system-wide strategic plan that conversation is designed to advance or address. And similarly, there are relatively few topics with the idea that we would delve deeply into each one. I just want to note something about the October meeting, which is coming up. We have a system-wide enrollment management topic in the October meeting, and that topic is designed to discuss each of the campus's enrollment goals and their progress along those goals. That contrasts with the system-wide enrollment management topic in the June meeting, which is explicitly about system coordinations, Share My App, and other kinds of innovations. So I just wanted to highlight that because it can be a little confusing if you look at the work plan and see these two topics that look quite similar.
Thank you, Provost. So we're going to get right into our agenda. And our next item, or our first item on that annual report on academic, is the annual report on academic program changes. I haven't looked on my screen, but all I see Ms. Eust is out there. I want to welcome our presenters, Phil Miller, the Assistant Dean of MBA and MS programs at Carlson School of Management, and Becky Eust, Professor in the Department of Design, Housing, and Apparel in the College of Design. I do now see Mr. Miller out there. Provost Crowson, I'll turn it over to you again for an introduction.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, members of the board. This is a required and annual presentation, and the details in the report are provided in your docket. Go ahead to the next slide, please. Today, I will summarize that report and share with you the process by which proposals make their way to this board. To help me show the engagement and thoughtfulness that faculty and program leaders bring to our process, I'm grateful to have two colleagues joining us today. Becky Eust is professor in the Department of Design, Housing, and Apparel. Since she started at the university in 1977, her research is focused on sustainable and affordable housing. Some of you may remember when Professor Eust served as interim dean of the College of Design from 2015 to 2017. She's currently the chair of the Campus Curriculum Committee and will discuss their processes as well as curricular innovation in the College of Design. Phil Miller is assistant dean for MBA and Masters of Science programs at the Carlson School of Management. He's a business executive and educator with experience in management consulting, general management, and nonprofit leadership. He runs the consulting enterprise at the Carlson School of Management, leading MBA students in consulting projects while teaching additional Carlson School classes at the executive, MBA, and undergrad levels in management and critical thinking. Thank you both for joining us today. Please go to the next slide. Your docket lists the new degree programs that the board approved last year. I won't repeat that list here, but I will mention a few themes. First, we saw the addition of 6 new master's degrees. Second, we created several new certificates, particularly at the Carlson School and at the post-baccalaureate level. As you will hear later, these innovations demonstrate, I skipped one. And third, we added a number of new undergrad minors. As you'll hear later, these innovations demonstrate responsiveness to our students and employers, many of whom are looking for targeted graduate degrees and targeted and smaller certifications like certificates and minors. This table also shows the number of programs discontinued each year. And it's important to note that we do discontinue programs regularly. As these changes indicate, the university adapts its offerings to meet the needs of our students and the job markets to which they aspire. I caution that not all new programs increase costs and not all discontinued programs decrease costs. Many programs leverage existing courses or particular faculty expertise. If the program is discontinued, these faculty typically remain employed. Programs are begun or discontinued primarily based on changes in the intellectual domain and in market demands, rather than as a cost-saving measure. Please go to the next slide. Your docket also notes the instances where changes to an existing or continuing degree program were substantive enough that they required board approval. These included 37 times where we added or discontinued a subplan or track within an existing program, or when we wanted to extend delivery of a degree online. Changes also include 6 times when we created a joint program, which provides an opportunity for students to combine efforts toward 2 degrees. Examples include the joint graduate degree option in the Master of Science in Business Analytics and the Master of Science in Finance degree, and the integrated undergraduate and graduate option between the Bachelor's of Science in Bioproducts and Biosystems Engineering degree and the Master of Science in Biosystems Science Engineering and Management. Please go to the next slide. This table shows the current number of degree programs in black and that same number 5 years ago in red. The one significant change is the number of post-baccalaureate certificates. Phil Miller is going to continue on this point in a minute, but as I mentioned before, this growth is responsive to demand from students and employers. Please go to the next slide. Beyond this cursory summary, I also want to call your attention to the process and review that happens before a program addition, discontinuation, or change comes to you for approval. This slide describes the university policy, which notes that the authority for academic plans originate at the local level in the departments. Please go to the next slide. There are 3 types of actions that come to you for approval. Additions include new degrees or majors, but also credit-based certificate programs, minors at the undergraduate, graduate, and professional levels. Academic changes can include new subplans or tracks within an existing degree, changing the name of a program to better describe its content, changes in how a program is delivered, such as online or in person at an off-campus location. Finally, we discontinue degrees, minors, certificates, and fellowships when student interest subsides, when the field or industry has moved in a new direction, or when faculty and program leaders have determined that priorities lie elsewhere. Please go to the next slide. Ultimately, requests for approvals come to you on the consent report. I wanted to give you some confidence that these recommendations have all undergone a significant level of planning, consultation, and review. Please go to the next slide. Proposals are initiated at the local level by the content experts who understand the market and their field's relationship with state and economic needs. By design, these are faculty-led processes, but proposals are also shaped and informed by program, college, and campus leaders to assess financial viability, need, and mission congruence. At the Executive Vice President and Provost level, we seek consultation with the Campus Curriculum Committee for Twin Cities programs and consider other implications such as accreditation, overlap with offerings of other institutions locally and nationally, and what resources might be necessary. Proposals come before the board only if the Provost and all other preceding entities have given their approval. What you do not see at the board level are proposals that are abandoned after leaders determine that a path is not the right fit for a campus or college, or more often when proposals are reworked with further consultation or after addressing concerns identified through the process. Please go to the next slide. Key principles guide the approval process throughout. Proposals for academic programs need to be aligned with the mission, strategic plan, and compacts of the home units, and with the university's broad institutional goals and strategic directions. Specifically, proposals are required to address 5 common criteria. These criteria are described fully in your docket, but they include the mission, priorities, and interrelatedness. How does the program support the unit's strategic direction and compact? Demand, development, and leveraging of resources. What evidence shows need for this program? Uniqueness and comparative advantage. What are the characteristics of the program that make it particularly appropriate for the university? Efficiency and effectiveness. Is this program within the capacity of the unit's resources? And quality, productivity, and impact. How will program quality be measured? Communication and consultation is required within the university when academic programs have the potential to affect or involve other units. In addition, consultation is required outside the university to show that state needs and markets are understood. Finally, the review needs to be timely. The process is about striking the right balance. We need to ensure there has been adequate consultation and rigorous review, while at the same time provide for agility that allows faculty to align student degree and curricular experiences with the cutting-edge discoveries of their field, which is among the reasons why students want to study at a research university. To help illustrate the attention that goes into academic program decisions and planning, I'm going to turn to Becky Youst from the College of Design and then Phil Miller from the Carlson School of Management. Please go to the next slide.
Thank you, Provost Croson, Chair Anderson, and members of the committee. I currently, as was mentioned, serve as the chair of the Twin Cities Campus Curriculum Committee. This was first established in 2012, and the committee is made up of faculty representing colleges on the Twin Cities campus and serves in an advisory capacity to the Provost regarding new curricular proposals. We review new courses and programs primarily to assess possible duplication with existing courses and programs to ensure that resources are used effectively. Proposers are required to consult broadly with other colleges prior to our review. When there is a concern expressed by one college that a proposing college is duplicating an existing course or program, and those colleges cannot resolve the concern, we serve as a forum to hear directly from the colleges to consider the situation before making a recommendation to the provost. We do not mediate intra-college issues. As you saw on the earlier slide, all courses and programs are vetted within a college before approval is sought at the provost level. Next slide, please. So I want to share an example of a fairly new program, the Master's of Heritage Study in Public History. It was first discussed among faculty colleagues in the College of Design and the College of Liberal Arts, who, through working with their community partners in research and teaching, recognized an opportunity to serve an important need in the heritage fields. Collaborating with leadership at the Minnesota Historical Society, this shared college program meets a need to diversify the profession, both in staff and in approaches to interpretation. I was serving as interim dean of the College of Design at the time that the program was being developed, and I worked with the faculty to complete financial analyses to understand the cost and revenue parameters. The program builds from existing courses in architecture, anthropology, and history, as well as adding new courses specific to the program, one of which is an internship. The faculty also developed a PhD minor using the same courses as are in the master's. The program faculty have been successful in leveraging university resources. As noted on the slide, funds to support students' tuition and stipends were obtained this summer from a 2-year, $500,000 Andrew W. Mellon grant. Earlier, a 5-year grant of $250,000 was received from the Rosemary and David Good Foundation. And State of Minnesota legacy funds through the Minnesota Historical Society support about $150,000 and support paid internships for the students. Next, Philip Miller of the Carlson School of Management will present additional examples.
Thank you, Chair Anderson and board members. It's a pleasure to present. I wanted to highlight 2 efforts at the Carlson School in the past year that I think are representative of the theme Provost Croson was mentioning earlier. First, we're launching a new Master of Marketing program. And the Master of Marketing program represents over a year's worth of work from our faculty, staff, and consultation with corporate and other external partners. It's part of a larger trend in graduate management towards more specialized degrees, as Provost Croson highlighted. So in the past several years, we've launched an analytics program, a finance program, a supply chain program. They've all been quite successful, and this is our next offering. wanted to just talk through the consultation and investigation that goes into a pretty significant decision for us in launching a new program. So we're targeting a fall 21 launch, and you all graciously approved this program over the summer in a vote. So how do we approach the exploration, design, and approval? One, it's really important for program success to have strong faculty leadership. There's obviously partnership between faculty and staff, but without strong faculty investment in a program, it's highly unlikely to be successful in our experience. In our case, our department chair was a strong believer in the opportunity. He and the department members actively engaged with external corporate partners, recruiters. We engaged an academic director to really build this program. But it's not just faculty, obviously. It takes a village. So there's a cross-functional team that involves team members from my department, our academic program office, and our career center. Most importantly in these programs, we want to really understand what the market opportunity coming out of a program is, so that we design it from a product design standpoint as something that will have really good market fit. Lots of inputs that may not be obvious to those outside our industry how much input we seek. We obviously consult with our recruiting partners, and we have a very strong marketing background in the metro. But also we have access through the university to tools like Burning Glass, which has extensive and very detailed market and employment data all the way down to job descriptions for people in certain majors and certain zip codes. So it helps us really zero in on titles, job descriptions, things like that help us align course titles and course composition to what the market's demanding. And then we put this together and we consider a variety of options and commit to the best aligned solution. Advance the slide, please. So if we shift from an example of building something wholly new and a significant investment of time and energy, our certificate offerings are a bit more of a resourcefully leveraging our existing assets. So the suite of certificates that we appreciate your approving earlier this summer, were all built out of existing courseware, right? So this slate is a response to market conditions and the further tailoring and kind of micro-sizing of credentials in our industry. We're competing, as you all are well aware, with online platforms, with peer schools, and the credential ladder used to be you got a bachelor's degree and you got a master's degree. It's much more nuanced than that now, as you can see in the slide. So we're trying to make sure we're well aligned to the market, and each certificate is very focused on a particular functional or market need. To the right on the slide, I've given an example of our business analytics class. And while that is 6 courses and 12 credits, all of those courses exist in our applied business analytics program. So I think we've taken a very responsible approach to making something out of nothing, in essence. So we've created a new product suite that we're having significant uptake with area firms with out of assets we already had. An example we often use here, it's very supply chain oriented, is airline seats. When the plane leaves, the seats are empty. Many of our courses have available seats, and really certificates are an effort to both align to the market, but also to utilize capacity that we already have to better serve market needs. So with that, I believe that's the end of our presentation. We open it up to questions. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Professor Hughes and Assistant Dean Miller. We're going to open it up for questions now. And is there, Ms. Lawton, do we have any hands raised?
Looks like Regent McMillan and then Regent Powell.
Okay, we're going to go to Regent McMillan and then Regent Powell. Regent McMillan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I don't think I properly used my raised hand, but being in person, I guess I can do it this way. So kudos to you, Provost Croson, and across the system to find academic-driven initiatives where you cross-leverage opportunities to not only provide a traditional degree, but that example that was just given about Carlson and the big data opportunities. So if we can make an undergrad, a graduate degree, and a certificate, wow, that's great to leverage that many times. I'm curious, as you go beyond education and look at research and outreach and then geographic system spread, it looks like from these examples, and that's just what these are, is Twin Cities examples, but are we looking for ways and opportunities to use what research and outreach offer and the system? Because you're going to find lots of different parts and pieces, and how does that come together? Because this looks like some collaboration going on this campus, which is obviously our biggest one, but I hope we're looking at every element and trying to do more of that cross-leveraging.
Who wants to tackle that answer?
I'll take that. Thank you.
Provost Croson?
Chair Anderson, Regent McMillan. So I fully agree that we are and continue to look for opportunities to collaborate across our campuses, but also with our community partners in our outreach activities. In fact, Becky, your example was really driven by a community partner that was that sort of generated that idea, and also most of these changes are similarly driven by faculty's research interests and discoveries. And as the discipline moves, as new horizons are opened up and new job opportunities are opened up as a result of those innovations, that's really driving the new curriculum as well. So it's a great point, and I fully agree.
Thank you. Regent McMillan, any more? Regent Powell.
Well, thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. One for Assistant Dean Miller. On these certificate programs and the way that Carlson School is using them. I mean, to me, it seems to be, a really good thing to do. And I'm just wondering if you could maybe characterize those programs a little more in terms of who's using them and how are they taught online or whatever, and how long does it take to get them? I just want to get a bit more of a feel for if you will, how they work. And then for Professor Yost, if she can, I'm just interested to what degree is this certificate program a model that we can apply across many departments within the university, and how far can we go with the program? It seems to be a great way to use capacity, and so I'm just interested in what the full potential is of that particular program.
Okay, Assistant Dean Miller, you want to take yours first, and then we'll go to Professor Hughes.
Yes, Chair Anderson, Regent Powell, thank you for the question. So. We're largely targeting working professional students with these. We're working to get all of the sections online. We're currently, given the fact that we're using our existing courseware, some of those are face-to-face, some of those sections are online, and we're targeting moving them largely online by next fall. And in the spirit of never wasting a good crisis, the current situation actually accelerates that for us because we've outfitted a number of the rooms in the building with improved technologies so that we can actually stream our face-to-face classes. So that's accelerated for us. One of the few good things out of the current situation. And if I were to characterize who are we targeting, it's early time, so we'll see who actually comes. Our hypothesis of who we're targeting are folks who are not yet ready for a full degree. So if you think of our part-time MBA degree as a 52 credit degree, and these certificates are all 12 or 13 credits, and they're very tightly targeted. So if you're at a mid-market company and a generalist, but you're moving into a more financial or HR role, we have certificates that would serve that need. We also have certificates that would serve as sort of a try before you buy. So the analytics certificate I showed represents the first 12 credits of our 32 credit applied analytics degree. So you could continue on in the degree if you chose to, and those credits transfer in with you. So, okay. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you. And I guess the other question is just the sort of revenue potential as you think, broadly about how these programs can be applied. I mean, is it going to be a third of Carlson revenue, or what's the potential?
I think the potential for certificates is equivalent, in aggregate is equivalent to something on the order of one of our master's programs. Because if you think people are paying per credit, so it's sort of a fractional component. But in the scale of our budget, our undergrad program and MBA programs are very large bubbles.
Right, okay.
But this is important and meaningful, and it doesn't cost us much to go get, and we think it enriches the program and participation in them, and also potentially enrollment pipelines for degree programs.
Great, thank you.
Professor Yost, I believe there was a question in there for you also, was there not?
I believe there was, and thank you, Chair Anderson and Regent Powell. Thank you for the question. I think I was talking about certificates in general, and in the College of Design, we have not had as many certificates as the Carlson School of Management, but we have developed them. And philosophically, it is a way to be more nimble and resourceful with existing resources. We have added certificates in response to a workforce need and further developing credentials, and we've also eliminated some. I believe on your docket at this meeting or recent one, we've had a certificate added to deal with apparel design and some of the technological issues in that field. So I think the other component, it's not just the teaching of students, but when we have a full program, whether it's a master's or a PhD, it does require, as Assistant Dean Miller mentioned, a lot of additional advising resources. And a certificate is very straightforward. Typically, there's no research program associated with it. And so it really is much easier to facilitate. And I think I commend the CSUM for their ability to develop these quickly.
Okay, great.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the next questioner in just a minute, but I just think these certificate programs, and I didn't know a lot about them, but I think it's the best of both worlds. It's very valuable to our community and the workers who can get these certificates to move forward in jobs and employment. And then to the university side, we can add ancillary income to these classes with very little cost or effort, or no cost or effort. So I think it's the best of both worlds. Regent Simonson has his hand raised. Regent Simonson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you, presenters. And I too agree that these certificate programs certainly increase the value to the workforce, and I'm very supportive of that. My question, and maybe you already said it, I got interrupted by a phone call. How are we going to get the word out, especially out to greater Minnesota? I live down in the southwest corner, and I see opportunity, especially for minority groups, working, and how are you going to get the word out?
Who wants to try to tackle that one?
So maybe I'll go for.
Oh, we got the assistant dean going to take a stab at it. Go ahead, sir.
Well, in our case, thank you for the question, Regent Simonson. In our case, we have a limited advertising budget, so part of this is straight up advertising at the state level, and we think that's an important part of communicating the value of the U statewide. I mean, as you highlight, a big part of our land-grant mission is being more accessible, and whole-scale degree programs are not always fully accessible for folks and not always what they need. So how do we be more nimble, as Professor Yost pointed out? There's maybe a broader U-wide answer to that, but at our level, we have some capacity and ability to do advertising and promotion within our system and our budget.
Sure.
Regent Simonson.
Yeah, one of the things I've said in the past is I would like to see extension used more to get the word out. I don't know if that's something that can be done or not. We have an extension office down here in Worthington. They're largely involved in 4-H and some of those programs, but to get the word out about the university and the opportunities, and again, the certificate program in our local industries, I think using extension would be good.
Regent Simonson, that's a tremendous point, and I come from the rural area just like you, and I was thinking to myself, the workers in Alexandria who would really benefit from this 12 credit certificate program to move up. I think in rural areas, extension is a great place to get the word out. And I also think local newspapers and radios, take public relations and PR. They're always looking for stuff to print about the university. So I think it's a tremendous opportunity to get more tuition dollars, if you will, while people are still living at home in rural Minnesota. I guess we have Regent Rosha. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having a good afternoon. The last exchange just struck a point that I wanted to make before we moved off this topic. I think there's a tremendous amount of promise as a bit of a voice from the past, this is different than what the issue we had a number of decades ago, where we had programs that were before the completion of a baccalaureate. These, I understand, are post-baccalaureate certificates, so there's a uniqueness there. But we went through a process where the university had a handful of programs that were, like Waseca was vocational ag and production ag, and actually Kirsten also at the time was a 2-year school. And we ultimately, in the austerity of the economic environment, decided that the university, in concert with the other systems, was going to work to to do what we do best and partner with the other schools to do what they did best. And so we got out of the 2-year business and we had certificates at the time. In fact, a little known fact that my dad got a horseshoeing certificate from the University of Minnesota at one time back in the day. And then of course taught me how to do it, and then he was off the hook. So the only thing I would say is, as we do go forward, is just to be real mindful that if we have other programs in the area that are offering like programs, that does kind of cuts against that effort to make sure that we are part of an overall system. I'm not seeing any great risk of that based on what what's here. I think these are areas that we have a unique capacity, and so on. But I just get a bit nervous when we start talking. If I shouldn't say nervous, but there's a caveat. You talk about the revenue side of it. We don't want to expand to the point where we start to lose the precise capacity that we are very good at, and we want to make sure we continue to work as an overall system. But otherwise, it looks very promising. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Rocha. Was that for your dad? Was that the game of horseshoes or the occupation of horseshoes?
On the old Gainey farm in Owatonna, they taught him how to trim horse feet.
That's terrific.
Like I said, he handed me the book, showed me how to do it, and never came back out to the barn. So,
thank you very much.
Good stuff.
Ms. Lawton, do we have anybody else to speak?
I don't see anybody else.
Do we have any final comments? Provost Croson or Associate Dean Miller or Professor Hughes? If not, terrific. It's good to know this, and this again from the Mission Fulfillment Board is a desire to give the rest of the board confidence on the process of what's happening and why some programs move forward and some fall off. So terrific program. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to our next item, which is number 3 on our agenda. It's listed as COVID-19 pandemic, update and future planning discussion. And Provost Croson, Vice Provost Bob McMaster, and John Hoffman, the Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at Crookston, are going to lead this discussion. President Gable, would you like to make some comments on this?
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson, Vice Chair Davenport, members of the committee. As the chair mentioned, I'm joined by our provost, by John Hoffman, Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs on the Crookston campus, Bob McMaster, Vice Provost and Dean of Undergraduate Education on the Twin Cities campus. This team is going to provide a status update on university enrollment and planning for the fall semester, as well as an overview of faculty and development and training that supports successful delivery modes for fall 2020. They're also going to go into the identification of some of the decision points that may signal shifts in the university's approach to the fall semester and start the conversation around the considerations for the spring semester. Members of the committee, we've used the time since the special board meeting on August 24th to learn a lot, from closely monitoring our peers. We want to make sure we understand the evolving higher education landscape, the ever-changing standards and conditions in our state and nationally, and make sure we have as much information as possible so that we can move forward in a way that we know prioritizes health and safety. In following the university's Sunrise Plan, and based on the findings of this deep analysis conducted during this 2-week window, we're implementing a new modification, or if you will, a graceful pivot, we've used that phrase before, of the Sunrise Plan, called the Maroon and Gold Sunrise. The Maroon and Gold Sunrise incorporates a hybrid fall semester that you've previously heard about, and also provides the framework for the return of students into university housing and for faculty members to offer courses in the mode they originally selected before we took a 2-week pause in order to engage in this additional research. The plan has a carefully designed 4-step process that allows for evaluation of COVID-19 transmission rates that ensure that our students are as safe, if not safer, than the surrounding communities that our campuses exist in. Duluth students actually began moving into university housing on September 4th using the previously approved safe move-in procedures, with their move-in ramping up extensively this week. The Twin Cities and Rochester campuses will follow suit starting on September 17th. But before I turn it over to the provost and our other presenters to describe this plan in more detail, I really want to express my thanks to our students, our faculty and our staff, the EMPC committee, particularly the staff in the various housing departments who are working nonstop to try to make this as smooth as possible during an unbelievably challenging time requiring dizzying and whiplashing changing decisions in real time. And they have absolutely risen to the challenge, and I'm extremely grateful for their commitment to the task. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll turn it over to the provost.
Provost Croson.
Thank you, President Gable, Chair Anderson, members of the board. As President Gable mentioned, the purpose of this presentation is to provide an update about this fall, both in terms of enrollment and course modality, and some details about our planning. I'll first turn the presentation over to Vice Provost Bob McMaster and Vice Chancellor John Hoffman to discuss the state of our enrollment.
Welcome, Vice Provost McMaster and Vice Chancellor Hoffman. Who's ever going to take over, go ahead. Bob, I think you're on mute.
Indeed, I was on mute. Thank you. Chair Anderson, members of the committee, I'd like to discuss the current status of our fall 2020 enrollment to start this section of the presentation. As the Board of Regents knows, we carefully have been tracking our enrollment over this year as we encountered major impacts and impediments from the pandemic. The most recent report was in June on enrollment, right before we entered into the summer melt season. There has been significant activity on all 5 campuses over the past 3 months. I will discuss the University of Minnesota Twin Cities enrollment data, while Vice Chancellor Hoffman will document the system campus numbers. All 5 campuses are very thankful for the remarkable work of their admissions offices. The U of M system was able to not experience significant declines in enrollment due to the diligence and knowledge and remarkable work of these offices. We owe these admissions offices a large debt of gratitude for this effort and the accompanying outcomes. As a reminder, the formal U of M census, enrollment census, will take place on Monday, September 21st, on the 10th day of the semester. And by the end of that week, we should have some final numbers available. The following slide, I guess the slide you have in front of you right now, depicts freshman enrollment at the top and transfer enrollment at the bottom. Over the summer, we track students based on active confirms. That's confirms minus withdraws, and switch to actual enrollments in late August. Those are the numbers you're looking at now. So these data are the first day actual enrollments for the 5 campuses. On the Twin Cities campus, our first day enrollment is 6,007, was 6,007 freshmen. This is 300 fewer students than we enrolled in 2019. As we have mentioned, the 2019 freshman class of 6,295, nearly 6,300, was the largest in 50 years, where for context, the 2018 freshman class enrolled 5,977 students. This represents the 6,007, a drop of 4.5% in fall-to-fall freshman enrollment from 19 to 20. For the system, the enrollment dropped by by about 500 students from 9,031 to 8,514, or a 5.7% drop. We also saw an increase in the number of students who requested a gap year. This is on the Twin Cities campus, a deferral, if you like, to 2021. 220 students requested a full gap year, and 98 students requested a gap semester. In normal years, the UMTC admits very few freshmen in the spring, very few. So the actual enrollment then will increase by about 100 students in January, if in fact these students arrive. The transfer numbers are also provided at the bottom of this slide. On the Twin Cities campus, transfer numbers are down from 1931 to 1802, or by 129 students. System-wide transfer numbers are down from 2645 to 2462, or about a 7% decrease. As we've discussed previously, transfer enrollments nationally have been dropping over the last 5 years, and our campuses, all of our campuses, are very dependent on Minnesota State for these transfer students, and thus dependent on the trends that we see in Minnesota State. I'll now turn this over to John Hoffman to talk about the system data for a few minutes.
Go ahead, Vice Chancellor Hoffman.
Thank you very much, Chair Anderson. And in representing the 4 Greater Minnesota campuses, there's a number of highlights that I would like to address within these data. For example, the University of Minnesota Rochester has again achieved record new student enrollment. At the University of Minnesota Morris, while the overall numbers are down, a third of the incoming class consists of American Indian students, and 40% of the students are Black, Indigenous, or students of color, the highest proportion in the school's history. At the University of Minnesota Crookston, I'd like to point out that we typically take a little bit different approach when we look at the data. We first consider the differences between online and on-campus students, and then we look at the differences between the new high school students, the new ones, and the transfer students within each of these 2 groups. So for example, with our online student population, we will have our largest class in school history this year. This reflects both continued growth in our online programs and also some students who initially applied for on-campus programs, but later shifted to online modalities. On campus, our numbers are down by about 120 students, which essentially reflects the number of students who shifted online, plus our losses due to the discontinuation of the football program. Lastly, and this is for all campuses, but I will speak in this moment for the Crookston campus, we continue to observe several important trends in terms of the demographic composition of our incoming students. Overall, and for the first time, more than half of our incoming students are first-generation college students. A higher proportion of our incoming students are Black, Indigenous, and students of color. And this is especially the case for our online students. And given continued growth among Pell-eligible students on campus, federal, state, and institutional aid now covers the tuition for a third of our students. And those same levels of aid cover the full tuition and fees for 27% of our students. Students such as these across all of our campuses have great potential, but also face significant barriers to success. And we have to invest more time and energy to provide the high quality services that these students need to ensure that they achieve their full potential. And with that, back to Dr. McMaster. And the next slide.
Go ahead, sir.
Next slide provides a disaggregated geographical enrollment for the Twin Cities campus. Not surprisingly, some of the trends detected in the late spring continued over the summer. These trends included an increase in Minnesota and reciprocity enrollments and a decrease in NR, and international enrollments. For the freshman class, the Twin Cities saw an increase of 2.2% in Minnesota residents. The 4,251 Minnesota residents represents the largest number in recent history. The Twin Cities experienced a 1.6% decrease in reciprocity students. In the end, we were trending up for most of the summer, and in the last week that kind of dropped off. As expected, we saw a fairly significant downtick with both NRNR and international students. Enrollment from other states, NRNR, was down 25.6%, and international enrollment was down 36.4%. The top 5 sending NRNR states included Illinois, 200 students, California, 48, Texas, 32, Missouri, 24, and Iowa, 23, aside from the reciprocity states. The top 5 countries this fall included China, 154, India, 21, Oman, 16, Korea, 12, and Malaysia, 9. It should be noted that 67 Chinese students are enrolled in the U of M CET program housed in Beijing, where they're taking our online classes and will arrive on campus this spring. That's a center in Beijing where they take classes, have a common U of M experience. They'll take one in-person class there to build a sense of camaraderie. In terms of transfer students on the Twin Cities campus, the geographical diversity, Minnesota enrollments were up, but reciprocity, NRNR, and international enrollments were down. As was mentioned, in total, transfer enrollment was down by 129 students, or 6.7%, on the Twin Cities campus. John?
Both the data are not presented here in this slide. For the greater Minnesota campuses, there were also declines with international students. This was especially true at Morris and Duluth. At the Duluth campus in particular, the yield for international students declined by 18%. Following some of the national trends where more students are staying closer to home for college, the greater Minnesota campuses saw larger proportions of their incoming classes coming from Minnesota or reciprocity states. Though these shifts in proportion may partially reflect losses in enrollment from outside of Minnesota. For example, at the Duluth campus, the NR yield rate was down by 9% this year. All campuses reported increases in student deferrals of enrollment. This was especially the case at the Duluth and Morris campuses. Bob, next slide.
Yes, next slide. The projected total enrollment picture is depicted on this fall-to-fall enrollment slide. Not surprisingly, total undergraduate enrollment in the system is down by approximately 2.3%, or about 1,024 students. All campuses except Rochester were down, with decreases varying from 11% to 1.3% for the Twin Cities. Rochester was up by 12%. One of the things that I'll mention here is throughout the summer, things were really progressing well in terms of fall-to-fall enrollment, and we didn't see a significant downtick there. So that was pretty refreshing. John?
Yes, at this point, I'd like to add a little context for some of these point-in-time data, especially as related to system-wide enrollment, strategic enrollment efforts. One of the strategies in which many of you have shown interest is the Share My App program. On the one hand, each of the greater Minnesota campuses experienced significant increases in the number of Share My Apps that we received this past year. And I wish to thank Bob and his team for their efforts in this area. On the other hand, the greater Minnesota campuses had very low yield rates for these applications. What that means is, in essence, that we reallocated a significant amount of professional staff time to these applications, but we did not have a strong return on investment for the time allocated. The data suggests that we have ended up spending time on applicants who probably never really considered our schools as viable options. So where do we stand with this process? I would note that it is an iterative process, and my interpretation is not that the program lacks value, but that we now have a data foundation in place that we can use to strengthen and refine the Share My App program so that it can be more effective. Further, I believe that the system-wide marketing efforts that we are implementing this year may help more high school students to see the value in the educational quality provided by each of the 5 campuses, which may also help to add to the effectiveness of the Share My App program. In short, the System Enrollment Council is giving this quite a bit of attention, and there continues to be encouragement that this program has value for the system. Next slide, and Bob.
Throughout the summer, all campuses were actively engaged with anti-summer melt initiatives, again, because of our concern over potential significant melt. This slide documents a few of the many initiatives on the Twin Cities campus. Throughout the summer, the Office of Undergraduate Education and the Office of Student Affairs sent out regular communication to confirm students with information on the curriculum, modalities, housing, safety, student support, and engagement. These communications were intended to keep students connected to the U of M throughout these summer months. OUE, the Office of Undergraduate Education, sponsored a town hall in July to provide an update on some of the key fall decisions and to answer questions from both national and international students and their parents. Starting in August, the Twin Cities replaced the traditional Welcome Week with a month-long Weeks of Welcome, where students received updates throughout the month, culminating in the September 7th virtual convocation. As is traditional, all students were mailed a Class of 2024 tassel. All colleges were also involved in constant outreach to their students with information regarding college-specific information or activities. Additionally, the advising community played a key role in reaching out to confirm students with information on registration, class schedules, and other important dates. Next slide. Thank you. On the next slide, the chart provides details on the class formats, what we're calling the course modalities on all 5 campuses. The first column provides data on the percent of students with 1 or more in-person or blended classes. This percent varied from 55% on the Twin Cities campus to 94% at Crookston. The slide also provides the percentages on classes offered in each of the 4 modalities on each of the campuses. These include, of course, the modalities of in-person, blended, remote, and online. John?
Briefly, I will call your attention to the fact that at the smaller campuses, it was generally easier to repurpose spaces and to adjust current classroom utilization to keep higher proportions of students and classes in person. I would extend a shout out to Sue Van Boris and her team for the great work that they did in helping the all five campuses, very diverse campuses, navigate complex processes and balance the needs for a shared overall approach, while also acknowledging and recognizing, supporting the unique decision-making processes at the various campuses, given the range of needs. Next slide.
The final slide on enrollment and class modalities provides additional detail on instruction for the Twin Cities campus. For in-person instruction, 90% of the 339 centrally controlled classroom seats were utilized. This resulted in 4,254 undergraduate open seats and 4,223 graduate open seats. But it needs to be noted that faculty often establish very high enrollment capacities, and this number is based on capacities that are not reached. 42.7% of instructors are teaching at least one in-person class, and 55% of the Twin Cities undergraduates are enrolled in one in-person class. Of course, the same open seat data don't really apply to the other modalities. I'd like to now turn the presentation over to Provost Croson, who will discuss faculty and instructional support. Provost Croson?
Go ahead, Provost.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, John, for all of your work. I want to especially reiterate my thanks to the admissions team and the recruitment team. At the start of this summer, our enrollment projections were extremely uncertain, and there was quite a lot of concern about where we would end up, and it's really due to their hard work that we're in as good a shape as we are. I'm delighted with where we ended up overall as a system, and especially in terms of retaining our returning students. It's been a fantastic effort, and I'm really grateful for everyone's work. Faculty and instructors have spent significant time and effort developing their skills and improving their distance teaching over the summer. We all recognize how the unexpected pivot in March took everyone by surprise. This fall will be much different than last spring. This slide lists some of the activities led by our Center for Educational Innovation and our Academic Technology Support Services. These include webinars, workshops, and discussions, 5- and 9-week trainings in online teaching and course design, individual consultations, Zoom tutorials, and many more activities. Participants included faculty and instructors from all of the campuses. Importantly, additional support and training has taken place locally within colleges and at Crookston, Duluth, Morris, and Rochester. Faculty system-wide took advantage of opportunities for individual coaching and local cohort programs, including in the College of Education and Human Development, School of Public Health, College of Liberal Arts, College of Biological Sciences, and the Duluth and Rochester campuses. Collegiate, division, and departmental groups met to address challenges, share ideas, and support each other, including the College of Veterinary Medicine, the College of Science and Engineering, and at the Morris campus. Some units created websites where faculty could share resources, activities, and ideas, including the School of Nursing and the Crookston campus. Many faculty, instructors, and mentors gave up their research and personal time in order to ensure the quality of our educational experience this fall. Remember that faculty retain autonomy over the modality of their courses this fall. Those that plan to teach in person or in a blended format are prepared for the modality shift at Thanksgiving. Please go to the next slide. President Gable mentioned, and you're all familiar with the Maroon and Gold Sunrise Plan that was recently shared with the Board of Regents and the campus community. You'll recall that step 1 involves students living in university housing under the equivalent of a stay-at-home order. Step 2 requires these students to be home by 9 p.m., and step 3 continues by asking students to be in their residence halls by midnight. At the time that this was implemented, we seemed quite strict. Since then, however, we have seen numerous peer universities implement similar restrictions, including Wisconsin-Madison, Alabama, Iowa, Winona State. Maryland, like us, delayed in-person instruction by 2 weeks. Even the University of Illinois, with their well-publicized frequent testing program, has implemented a 2-week period of restricted in-person activities. Since we last met, other universities have transitioned to fully distanced education, including James Madison University, Temple University, West Virginia University, Virginia State, and the University of Oregon. We continue to monitor our peers and the broader environment closely and are prepared to pivot again if necessary. Finally, President Gable mentioned our planning for the spring. The scenarios group that she formed and I chair continues to meet weekly and is beginning to discuss our planning for the spring, including class modalities, calendaring issues, and other open questions that we will be bringing to the board at a later date. Chair Anderson, members of the board, that concludes our presentation, and we welcome your questions.
Terrific, terrific. That was a good presentation. We learned a little bit. Interesting for me to know that it's one of the largest numbers of Minnesota students in recent history. That's always good for Minnesota students. Taxpayers know that their own children are coming here. I'm going to go to questions. Right now we've got, I'm going to call on Regent Beeson with Representative Tojo Garcia on deck. So Regent Beeson, if you would.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, presenters, and all the people that stand behind you on the work to recruit and train and enroll these students this fall. I know it's taken a really significant effort, and on balance, our numbers look pretty good. I was going to ask Vice Provost McMaster, I hadn't seen, maybe I missed, I had to step out for a moment, the ACT scores by campus. Would you mind putting that slide up for me?
Do you have that available, Vice Provost McMaster?
Chair Anderson, Regent Beeson, I do not have the ACT scores for the entire system. Of course, the final ACT is not determined until the 10th day when we do our census. I can tell you that on the Twin Cities, the ACT this year, which was actually holding at 28.0 until about 7 a.m. yesterday morning, when it did slip to 27.9. But the good news is we, with everything going on, with going deep into the wait lists this year, our ACT basically held at 28. Maybe Vice Chancellor Hoffman knows the Crookston score. Of course, they're test optional. I'm afraid I don't know the other scores.
But Vice Chancellor Hoffman, it would be good to know, do you know what Crookston's is with our first take it test optional?
Chair Anderson and also Regent Beeson, let me share that the average for the ACT score at the University of Minnesota Crookston would be deceptive because we had approximately half of our students who did not submit a score. And so I don't think that would be a good comparative point. I will tell you that the number of students with who applied, admitted, and were accepted in the top ACT tiers, the 28 to 30 and the 31 and above, those all increased. I can also tell you that we witnessed increases in the average high school GPA, and those data we have for all students, as well as the number of students from the top 10% of their class rank. So that number increased across all admitted students for our campus this past year.
Thank you. Regent Beeson, do you have more questions?
Follow up, if I might. Thank you. You know, we're sort of casually drifting away from this focus on ACT, and to me, that is an indicator of student preparedness, and it is a predictor of likely higher costs. And Mr. Hoffman alluded to this: the cost of supporting students that are coming in less prepared. So there's going to be cost impacts. There's going to be maybe graduation impacts. I think we need to keep that number in front of us, even if the numbers aren't, going the trajectory that we're used to. Mr. McMaster, the Vice Provost, used to lead with that number all the time, and I think, you do have a maroon and gold requirement of being at 28. Now you might be a round up guy, but I'm a banker, so I'm a round. I view you out of compliance at this point. I'll put you on notice there, but all this gets sort of muddled around with the virus and all the activity we've had. But at the end of the day, it's still an important indicator to me, and whether I mean, I can take the information the way you've got, but I'd rather see the data than not have the data, because otherwise I'm just sort of, you know, one of the advantages of the ACT was there was a standardized, it was a platform, it was a standardized metric that we could use. Again, not controlling all our planning, but, you know, otherwise we're in just sort of kind of guessing land here with who our students are in terms of their preparedness to be successful.
Appreciate that, Regent Beeson. Vice Provost McMaster looks like he has a answer.
Yes, Chair Anderson and Regent Beeson. One of the things I wanted to say is that, as I think you know, I agree with your assessment of the use of ACT and that it's still a metric that provides valuable information. As an aside about being out of compliance after this enrollment season, if you'd like to fire me today, I'm game for it. But one of the things that you might be interested in is we have a team now that's putting together a white paper on the pros and cons of ACT and standardized tests. This has become a national issue with nearly all institutions backing away from the use of ACT or SAT for fall 21 for obvious reasons. We don't know if students are going to be able to get access to the test. After that, we have to make a decision about how to proceed. So this white paper is going through some of the literature, some of the analyses that have been done about how ACT affects admissions. And in October, in that series of enrollment management discussions, we plan to come back with some additional information on how we view ACT for conversation.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Hoffman, and then we'll go to Regent Beeson.
Yes, Chair Anderson and Regent Beeson. I would note that whereas the ACT was optional, we added a set of holistic measures to assess our applicants. We increased the number of students that we denied, frankly, quite a bit, multiple times over, and in a year when enrollment was a push for our campus. I think that reflects our commitment to the high standards of the University of Minnesota as a system, as well as the Crookston campus. I would wish to clarify also that it's exciting to see larger numbers of students who are Pell eligible from low-income families, who are first generation in their families, who are coming to our campus. I would see that as the reason for us to invest time and energy into support services for students, in some cases who have not been particularly well served in prior educational experiences, etc. But students who have great potential. I would not characterize our incoming class as one that has any higher proportion of students who are not positioned to succeed at the University of Minnesota Crookston.
Regent Beeson, did you want to continue your questioning?
Well, one other comment back to the Vice Provost that, you know, I'm glad the system is taking the issue on instead of having this be a sort of a loose and localized decision. We needed to have this discussion, and then it's really kind of moved away under this crisis environment. And I don't think that's the way to deal with this important of an issue. So I'm glad you're taking that on, and that you'll provide this board with a report while it's being developed. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you, Regent Beeson. We're going to move on to Representative Tojo Garcia at this time.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you, presenters. I have a couple of questions, so if you'll bear with me, I'd appreciate it. But my first question is regarding the Canvas and Academic Technology Support section, which is on page 37 of the docket materials. Firstly, could you elaborate a little bit on the nature of these technology trainings? Were they mandatory or elective?
Provost Grossen will take that question. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson, Representative Garcia. So they were elective. Faculty, not all faculty were teaching at a distance, and so not all of them needed them. Many faculty, this is their normal teaching modalities, so those weren't necessarily what they required, right, were required. Nonetheless, they were heavily advertised, they were heavily encouraged, and we found, as you saw on the slide, quite a lot of take-up by faculty. We also found that there was a lot of peer-to-peer interaction by faculty, so faculty who had attended one of the sessions would talk with their colleagues about it. And even if that colleague then didn't attend, they would discuss what was learned and they interacted around the topic. This is a change for everybody, and I think our faculty have really embraced the challenge.
Representative Tojo Garcia, you had more.
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. Secondly, I understand that there are going to be opportunities during the semester for students to provide their feedback to instructors via Canvas. Do you have any idea what the response rate is going to be for those surveys?
Provost Colson.
I do not, but I might ask Vice Provost McMaster if he has any evidence about previous semesters. I don't know if we have that off the top of our heads.
Vice Provost McMaster.
Yes, Chair Anderson and Representative Tojo Garcia. I don't have any immediate evidence of what the survey response rate will be for this. I can say that for the CERU survey and some of the others that we've sent out, it's in the ballpark of, let's say, 35 to 40%. But that may be completely meaningless in terms of this Canvas survey. So I'm afraid we just don't know the answer to that right now.
Representative Tojo Garcia, any more?
Yes, one more, thank you.
One more, okay.
Thank you for your answer. Finally, I was wondering if instructors have had any opportunity to receive trainings on trauma-informed teaching, especially since the circumstances under which so many students are taking classes this semester is vastly different from, obviously, past.
Provost Colson, I think you're the person to answer that.
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson, Representative Tojo Garcia. So those kinds of trainings are indeed available. They were not, as you might imagine, as widely used as the trainings about how to deliver education via different modalities. But for faculty who are seeking them, they're absolutely available.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Regent Mayron. Great to see you out there, and you have the floor.
Thank you. I have a question I think probably goes to Vice Provost McMaster. I'm looking at what was slide 4, page 41 of the materials that were provided to us. And you put up a comparable slide, Provost McMaster, today that had more current data. Maybe you could put that slide up. It's the one, the fall 2019, fall 2020 undergraduate enrollment to date system-wide.
I actually have no control over the.
I'm guessing somebody's trying to get it up, but it's the undergraduate enrollment to date. What is your question, Regent Mayron?
My question is this. Yeah, sure. There obviously the numbers change from the materials when they were provided to us, which were using August 31 data or data as of August 31, and the slide, this particular slide has data, I believe, as of September 8th or 9th. I'm trying to see it here. Let's see. Well, it's on my screen.
I think it says September 9th.
Yeah, September 9th.
Yeah, and I've got a bunch of different ones on my screen right now, so I'm trying to find the one. So in any event, maybe you, in the current screen, the one that you put up today for undergraduate enrollment date, Duluth, the difference on August 31, we were anticipating total enrollment was going to be down 1,116. And my memory is, I can't see the slide on my screen here, that the Duluth figure, I think, ended up as at least of September 8th or 9th of 445 that they were down. So my first question, then I have a couple follow-up questions, is do you have any explanation on what accounts for, it looks like a major difference between August 31 and September 9th as to what actually happened at Duluth?
Vice Provost McMaster, you're nodding your head.
Yes, Chair Anderson and Regent Mayron. As I mentioned briefly, and this gets really complicated, Over the summer, what we're doing is we're tracking active confirms. And those are students who have confirmed with one of the campuses and they're staying the course. And we take out withdraws, students who say we're no longer interested in Minnesota, and then we take out those gap year requests that I talked about briefly. So we did a shift as we went from the data that you have, which was from about a week ago or more, which were active confirms, to actual enrollments. So what you have with the current slide are the actual first day enrollments. And we saw this on the Twin Cities as well, not to the same extent Duluth did. We saw a fairly dramatic change as we went from active confirms, which is again the hard currency through the summer, to the actual enrollments that you get on the first day, which again shows the volatility this summer of student behavior. So it has to do with the fact we were tapping into two different data sources. I'll be candid. And so the enrollment data really becomes the accurate data now, both for the first day enrollments and then of course for the census on the 10th day.
And so I have a follow-up question, Chair Anderson.
Regent Mayron.
Yes, so when, I think you may have included this in your presentation, but when then do you think you're going to have the final numbers such that from those numbers you can then begin to estimate the actual impact on tuition revenue for the fall semester, so that we really truly see what the impact is going to be?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Vice Provost.
Yeah, terrific question. Chair Anderson and Regent Mayron. The final numbers, and this is kind of a national process, is they're taken on the census day. So the census day this year for all campuses is September 21st. So at 5 p.m. on at midnight on September 21st, we lock down all the data and spend the rest of the week kind of cleaning up the data, getting rid of errors and inaccuracies. These are huge files that are being worked on. And so normally, and every day I'm badgering our data people for these numbers as we get through that week. Probably by Thursday of that week or Friday, we have the final enrollment numbers for the whole campus. And at the undergraduate level, and probably at the graduate level as well, in past years, we don't see any significant movement between the first day and the 10th day. So I don't think you'd expect to see by the 10th day a 5% drop in tuition or a 5% increase in enrollment, not tuition. This year, all bets are off. And so I can't make that promise, but I don't think we're going to see a dramatic change. And I think our IR people and our budget office are already working with these numbers, these enrollment numbers, to start their tuition estimates for the campus. After the 10th day, and we lock down the data that week, there's a memo prepared with the absolute final data in all categories, all campuses, freshmen, transfers, undergraduate, professional, graduate, all campuses, that will go from Provost Croson to the Board of Regents.
And is that the point in time then we will be able to really start to get a more accurate picture of the impact of tuition on our revenue sources? In other words, we've been using various estimates based on various percentages that are not borne out in the final data.
That would be correct.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Next on my list, and just so you know, if I haven't called on you, I've got quite a list here, but I've got all the names. Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. So Regent Mayron got at one of my questions, which was that number was quite eye-popping at Duluth, and it doesn't look like perhaps it's as bad. But so I won't ask that question again. But I do want to make a couple points and just make sure these are, and then clarify or question staff as to whether we've got them right. As we do a better job, I think, of having a frank discussion in this boardroom about system-wide enrollment planning, I think we have to have the kind of conversation that we're having today and that Vice Chancellor Hoffman was getting at, and that is we've got to put on the table and make it clear what happens when the Twin Cities drops its testing requirements, lowers its ACT, and I think so we should just have a chart at some point. That was 156 at Duluth and 42 at Morris and 19 at Crookston, and make sure those numbers are front and center, because we have to plan for the whole system and then help those institutions make up for what was turned out to be the Twin Cities gain. And I think that's generally the way it'll work. As the Twin Cities drops down its waiting list, the implications will be felt both at Minnesota State and across our system campuses. So I just think that's really important. And then the other one that I think is critical, and Regent Beeson got to this, and that is that as we go down that ACT scale, we as a governing board have to be prepared to provide and find resources to help the institutions that are picking up students with either lower ACTs or potentially no ACTs that aren't as ready to get done in 3 or 4 years, the student support costs that are going to be there, because I have a belief that they're going to be significant, and in order to help a student get through in 4 years with a 5 or 6 or 7 point difference on an ACT, we're going to need to invest. So telling campuses to cut or colleges to cut costs at the same time we're asking them to bring in students who aren't as ready to succeed, perhaps, that's just not going to work. So I really appreciate that kind of frankness in the conversation, and that we're all as board members listening to what our leadership is telling us. One question, and then I'm done, and that is for probably, I don't know if Mr. Hoffman can answer this or if anybody's on the phone from Duluth, but our 2-week delay impacted that campus severely. And it was 11th and a half hour, and I'm not here to make that point again, just curious whether anybody from UMD can quantify just what that cost us in terms of enrollment up there, because it was 3 days for those parents and those students to have to pivot, and now they're there and things are gonna, I'm hopeful it'll all work out, but I was fearful that might be expensive for us in the sense of students deciding, well, forget it, or I won't even go on campus, or I'll find a new campus, a new college altogether. So I don't know if we have that sort of information. That's probably too early to tell, but if anybody does, I'd be interested in knowing it.
Vice Chancellor Hoffman, have you talked to your colleagues at Duluth about the 3-day issue?
Yes, so the data at this point are preliminary, so I will echo what Dr. McMaster shared in terms of the census state. That being said, the data from Duluth do indicate that post-decision in change of that guideline, that there was a drop in matriculants on the campus, as well as potentially a shift to deferred numbers. And I believe that we have an individual from Duluth on the line. I don't know if they have precise data or not to that effect.
And I don't know if we actually need it right now, but we've got a lot of other questions, but it's good to find something out. And I would concur with Regent McMillan that we need data on what these things are. There was at least one theory of thought that ACTs would vastly improve with test optional, because those that have lower ACTs won't put them on. The other thought of thinking is that the students who maybe don't have high ACTs would be much more likely to apply. So we'll end up admitting more of those, just like Regent McMillan says, and they're going to need some help. And so we need to know where that is. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and that feeds in quite a bit to what I wanted to touch on here quickly. I recently going through some materials, a box at home. I came across a picture with Nobel laureate Norman Borlaug when he was still alive. I had the honor of meeting him, and part of the conversation with Mr. Borlaug was the fact that he had some learning disability challenges when he was younger, and would not have likely been admitted to the university under the growing reliance on things like standardized exams. And now that's not to take take the value away from standardized exams. I mean, it is fascinating that a lot of the institutions that we consider aspirational peers are moving away from that. I think part of that is a recognition of other indicators of success, and also how that has had a propensity to limit access for certain people, different communities, including geographic communities, from admission to institutions. But Regent McMillan and Regent Anderson just touched on this. One of the challenges that we had when we were struggling with a very low graduation rate, it was not necessarily simply the fact that we lacked resources, because we clearly did. As a CLA student, I never had the same advisor 2 quarters in a row, and it was very, very difficult. We were one of the last institutions to go online with registration and so on, and I think those things have been really improved in the last couple of decades, and we're state of the art in those areas now. But so it wasn't just a lack of those kinds of support mechanisms, but it was a really difficult system that was not geared toward the undergraduate experience. And again, with leadership starting from then through that, through to the present, that stuff has really been significantly improved. But I just want to push back a little bit when I understand that we have an ACT, and of course this cohort of scores is different because we have a much smaller percentage submitting scores, as was pointed out. So when we talk about that number, I'm not really sure what that number means compared to previous years. But the ACT works, I'm really looking forward to that report that's forthcoming, that Vice Provost McMaster referenced, because there is a diminishing return on that in terms of where you are. I mean, obviously students that really struggle and have quite low numbers, sub 20, for instance, may have a really difficult time with an education at the university, whereas students that come in with a good solid GPA and a good work ethic, who maybe aren't superstars on standardized tests, but coming in, in the mid-20s, they've got every opportunity to succeed. And some of those folks go on to be exceptional, and we know that. But with that being said, I was really, and Vice Provost McMaster, I think I'm calculating this right. It appears that based on the numbers on the slides, we're at over 70% resident students in terms of new students, and we're a higher number than the past in our returning student, or in the transfers rather. I think those are things that we should, if that is in fact true, and if it holds after the 10 days, I think that's something that we should really promote with the state and others, that we are meeting this need in a substantial way. And I would urge us to continue that way. That's the public land grant university. If you look at our original charter, our original mission, it's to educate the industrious classes of the state, of the territory, and I think this is really getting at that. My question, and it seems like maybe it was answered, but I don't know if it was dead on, but when I see that number as it is, how many Minnesota students are trying to be admitted to the university? We know that prior to the Access to Excellence strategic planning process and the reorganization in '91, any Minnesota student was admitted to the university, and then that started to narrow down until General College and University College were no longer admitting students outside of a degree granting programs. But how many Minnesota students are applying and not being admitted, as reflected on those slides?
Is that a question, Regent Rocha?
It is, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do we know that, Vice Provost McMaster?
Yes, Chair Anderson and Regent Rocha. I would have to return to you with exact numbers, but I know for a fact that we have been admitting more Minnesota residents, especially this year, than in the past. You'll recall that, to Regent McMillan's point, we went way further into the wait list, but we also shared a lot of the wait list. We shared 5,000 names off the wait list. But on our campus, on the Twin Cities campus, we admitted nearly every Minnesota resident who we deemed was admissible based on their grades in ACT. So indeed, that number went up, but I can get you down to the post if you'd like to see them.
Okay, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, I would love that information, Vice Provost McMaster. and the more sort of specificity as far as the number who've applied, the number who were rejected, and then sort of what their credentials look like, what are their ACTs, GPAs, to kind of understand, I think that would be helpful for us as a board, particularly in this difficult financial circumstance, to recognize, students that would have come here, but for, an understanding of where the cutoff is. And I think that'd be helpful for that future conversation. Thank you.
Sure.
And geography would also be very helpful as well, particularly rural Minnesota and the core cities.
Geography is always helpful.
Thank you.
Regent Rocha, you are aware that Vice Provost McMaster is a geography major. I'm reminded of that virtually every day I talk to him.
I'm slow on the uptake, but I finally figured it out, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to Regent Powell.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. So this is a question for any of the three presenters, and maybe Vice Provost McMaster, starting with you. And it really, as you reflect, on the year you've just been through, it's been challenging, and I think we really have landed in a pretty darn good spot. And so, thanks and congratulations to all of you. But as you reflect on, what you've been through, it's been very challenging. And but I'm sure you've learned. I'm sure we've learned some things too. And I'd just be curious about what's sort of been surprising, or what really are some of the key learnings about going through this kind of very unusual year. And then maybe as you look forward to next year, what are the kind of just off the top of your head, one or two really major opportunities as we look forward to, a year that's more normal, touch wood, but as we look forward to the next year. So just your reflections, on those two questions.
Vice Provost McMaster.
Sure. Chair Anderson and Regent Powell, in terms of lessons learned here, that's a tough one, in that we're still kind of unraveling where we are and what we've accomplished over the last half a year. I will say this, that I think the fact that this year, as we discussed in April and May, we've become a more regional university, as students this year, for obvious reasons, did not want to travel far to go to school. Has put us in kind of a different spot. To Regent Rocha's point, we have a much higher number and percent of Minnesota residents this year. I think will bode well with the legislature. I think it bodes well with you. I was surprised to see, even with our reciprocity states, at least until the last week, that we were trending up and doing extremely well with the local environment. I've often thought, for instance, we should be tapping more into perhaps Iowa than we do. We don't have reciprocity with Iowa, but these are students who know Minnesota and like Minnesota, and I think want to come here. Again, in terms of what happened, I think we're going to have to do a deep forensic analysis over the next month. In terms of the future, despite the fact we've become a bit more of a regional university, I still highly value the national and international students that come to this campus. I've said this before, I have an undergraduate advisory board, and to the person on that board, they all value being in a classroom with students from Alabama and South Carolina and New York and Washington and China and Azerbaijan, and I'd hate to see us lose ground. We did this year, you saw the data. I'd hate to see us lose ground on all the progress we've made in becoming a more national university. And our regional recruiters were grounded this year. They couldn't go out and recruit, and so that hurt us badly. It hurt everybody badly. And in the international space as well, we really should be attractive to an international student body, and so I'd like to see us return to our previous kind of enrollments in both those spaces. I think that's important for a flagship R1 university.
All right, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Provost McMaster. Thank you, Regent Powell. Regent Hsu, still there?
Yep, I'm just waking up a little bit. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think a lot of, obviously the ACT question I think has been dealt with a little bit. I'm looking forward to seeing the report. My question is more on, I didn't see any financial information here about what we're estimating our losses were on the 3 campuses, especially through the 2-week delay. And then also we got some information about how many housing contracts were lost in the Twin Cities during that time. I don't think I received any information about what happened at Duluth, but you know, I'm not expecting detailed information today. I'm sure we're working on that, but is there any indication of about where we are? Because the you know, it was just $5 million just for the delay, the 2-week delay, and then you know, obviously the contracts, housing contracts, and possibly tuition that was lost during that time could be significant.
I don't know, you know, this is a mission fulfillment meeting, but President Gable, do you want to try to answer that? Are you willing to? Okay.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, Regent Hsu. It hasn't ended yet, so it's difficult to do the calculation now, but we will get that data for you once we can postmortem the consequences of all of the different impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, including the delay.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
I just thought I'd comment. So the slides that were actually shown are not the same ones that are in our document materials. So I think Regent Mayron mentioned that as well. Are we going to get copies of the actual presentation?
I would guess we can. I know they're updated one just last night or the night before. So I'm hearing from board staff that they will send out the slide presentation. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it, Regent Hsu?
All I got.
Oh, you got it. Okay. Thank you. Regent Sviggum.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I think my question is appropriate on the heels of comments by Regent Rocha and Regent McMillan. And it's to Vice Provost McMaster. Vice Provost McMaster, I've always found in governing that it's harder to change something than it is to maintain the status quo. I think that's true in most governing boards. My question to you then is regarding the ACT and the year pause that we are making right now. I think is because not all the ACTs could be scheduled and students couldn't get to them. But the words you used concern me just a bit. The words you used were after the next year. It says after that we will have to make a decision. I'm not sure that my perception is after that we have to make a decision. I think we are taking a year pause, and from my perception, and a year from now, we're back to using the ACT again as one of our entrance requirements and a standard to be met. Would you agree with me, or do you think there's a decision to be made after this year's pause?
Vice Provost McMaster.
Yes, Chair Anderson, Regent Sviggum. I did use that language purposely, and I'll tell you why. I think the testing landscape is changing, and we can see nationally that there have been a number of institutions that have decided to move away from standardized tests permanently, not a one-year hiatus. Now, we're in good company now in that most of the institutions, most of our peer institutions have decided to take a year and reassess where they're going after that. I'll point to the University of California, you know, the largest public university system in the country with a lot of very prestigious institutions. They have decided to not return to standardized tests for the next 5 years. And in the meantime, they are proposing developing their own UC admissions test that California residents would take. ACT itself in Iowa City, they're struggling a bit now because of the lack of testing this year. We are looking very carefully at what standardized tests do in terms of admissibility, in terms of diversity. I think it's time, and I'm a strong supporter of standardized tests. I'll go on the table to say that. But I think periodically governing boards like you and institutions should step back and take a look at the evidence to say, as we move forward, do we still value the contributions that these standardized tests make? And so our white paper, it's not really a report, it's a white paper, will simply lay out the pros and the cons of the use of standardized tests, and we can have a conversation about how to move forward.
Just to follow up, Mr. Chairman. Bob, just to follow up if I could, and I agree with you that some of the landscape is changing. I'm not sure it's necessarily for the better, but I do know that some schools are changing that landscape. And I agree with you that some form of standardized test is an important factor. It's not the total decision, but it's a factor. But I guess my question to you is, how do you approach this year pause we're doing? I don't think after this year pause, we have to make a decision. I think standardized tests, ACT, will be part of our requirement, part of our admissions requirement. I don't think we have a decision to make. I think we're just taking a year pause. Would you agree with me or disagree regarding that decision not to be made?
So, Chair Anderson and Regent Swigum, one of the things I've learned in the 13 years in this job is one to defer to your boss on these questions. And at this point in time, I think Provost Posen might have some important contributions to this conversation.
Would you like to contribute, or do we want to move on?
I'm happy to. Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, Regent Swigum. So at the moment, the university is using ACT scores or SAT scores in its admissions process. And the Regents agreed that we were going to take a pause this next year because of the inability of students to take the test. We were asked and we agreed to do some research, do some background, bring some data to the board so that the board could consider what it wanted to do moving forward. But I think it would take an active decision of the board in order to change where we are at the moment. Not sure if that's helpful for you.
I'm trying to understand it. I was with you until your last 2 or 3 words, and then just so you know, Provost Crowson and other board members, I'm considering, at least from my perception, that we're taking a year pause. Yep. After the year pause, the ACT will be part of our standard requirements.
And Regent Swigum, I think it's important to say the 12 people that eventually sit around this table make that decision. We might get recommendations other ways, but I think it's important to note that those 12 people will make that decision.
I respect that totally. I just wanted not to surprise anybody a year from now, or be worse for me to be surprised.
Thank you. Okay, we've got 3 more speakers, and we're going to go. We've got Regent Simonson ready to go, Representative Ali, and then Michael Kenyana bringing us home. So, Regent Simonson. Thanks for being patient.
Chair Anderson, thank you, presenters. I want to stay with standardized testing, and I really look forward to the pros and cons that Vice Provost McMaster mentioned. I just want to make a couple of comments on my experience with the standardized testing. I've read someplace, I can't remember where, but with regards to that testing, issues of racial disparity, financial situations within a family, got more money and go practice the test, whatever, and minorities are having a challenge. So those are issues for me. I don't know what a 28 means, an ACT of 28. How does that say, about our thing? But I met a student a couple of years ago at a Farm Fest, senior in high school. She seemed to have a decent grade average. She wanted to go to the Twin Cities campus, but she didn't apply because her ACT she didn't think was adequate. She didn't want to spend the money because she didn't think she'd get in anyway because of her ACT. But I am for test optional. I just want to tell a little bit about my story just for a minute here. I think I've mentioned it in the past. I've got 2 sons. They're all adults, all finished college, university. My oldest son had a 31. My second son had a 29. My daughter, who ended up in the low mid 20s, she said it's good we didn't have any more kids, but she has a PhD today. And then I look at my own life. Okay, I probably shouldn't tell this, but I graduated high school with just under a 1.8 out of 4 point. Barely got out, but I was able to test and get into a university started in California. Okay, today I have a PhD from the University of Minnesota. So I am strongly in favor of test optional, but not test requirement. That's my only comment.
I think Vice Provost McMaster wants to just respond. Thank you.
Yes, Chair Anderson and Regent Simonson, that's an interesting point, and we hear that a lot. But I want to make one thing crystal clear that I think gets lost in the admissions process. Nobody gets admitted or rejected on an ACT. We do holistic review. And so we look at the entire record, and we look at students who have overcome life circumstances and where they come from. Did they come from Greater Minnesota, where they didn't have the same access to a curriculum that they might have in Rochester or the Twin Cities? Our middle range for ACT is 26 to 31. That's the middle range. That's actually the more meaningful number than a 28 average. What that means is that 25% of our students come to the Twin Cities campus with an ACT of less than 26. In fact, we have a lot of students here with ACTs of 21, 22, even 20. Why are they admitted? Because we view them as good risks at that level to come and succeed at the University of Minnesota. They may have very strong grades. They may have a 3.8 GPA and a 22 ACT. We think the grades are more meaningful than that. It may be they have all kinds of extracurricular activities. It may be that they had a parent who died and they've struggled financially. So holistic review takes into account the whole student experience. And so ACT is just another metric, another contributor to the admissions process. I think that's really important to understand.
Thank you, Vice Provost McMaster. Student Representative Ali, thanks for waiting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do very much, this conversation being had around standardized testing, I do want to a little bit shift back to the maroon and gold plan. First, in regards to the maroon and gold sunrise plan, how will the curfew be enforced, and what is the plan to of making students aware of this?
I think that's probably a good question to be answered by Provost Croson.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, Representative Ali. So students have received numerous communications, and students who will be moving into the residence halls will be receiving more about what are the various steps and where they are in the process. At the moment, the stay-at-home order doors at the residence halls will be key card access only, so we'll be able to monitor who's coming in and out. And after 9 p.m., there will be a sign-in and a sign-out sheet. And so we'll be able to ask people why it is they're leaving and why it is they're coming back. And that will remain as we move through the various steps, although the time of the sign-in, sign-out will change. In general, we're extensively consulting with OGC and soon with student leadership to talk about consequences for individuals whose behavior puts others at risk. But we take an educational and a development-focused approach to resolving violations of student conduct expectations. Our goal is to ensure that students understand the behavior we expect of them and why. We believe that focusing on education and restorative justice contributes to the educational and maturation process of our students and ultimately generates more positive behavior than sanctions alone do. That said, we have processes, of course, in place for students who violate codes of Conduct, the Office of Community Standard for violations of the Student Conduct Code, and the Housing and Residential Life staff for violations of the Housing Code. But our first inclination is always to educate and to explain and to allow students to help them make the right choices.
Thank you. If I may follow up, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Chair.
Yes, sir.
So with that being said, is the university exploring any disciplinary actions, for example, like expulsion or a fine of some sort or suspension?
Regent Croson.
Yeah, Chair Anderson, Representatives Ali. So disciplinary actions are a result of the disciplinary process. So we need to make sure that we have due process when we're considering disciplinary actions. On the other hand, we also need swift responses. And so finding the balance between the swiftness of the response and ensuring due process is going to be what we're consulting with OGC and with student leadership about.
Anything else, Representative?
Nope, I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to the Representative Board. Appreciate having you. Regent Kenyana.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I had a brief clarifying question, but Representative Ali, just going to follow up on his question before I ask mine. Provost Croson, just clarifying the things you detailed about the key card access and the signing in and signing out. Is that system wide? Is that system wide, or is that for the Twin Cities campus?
Provost Croson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson, Regent Kenyana. So my understanding is that this is system-wide, although the specifics for each campus are going to be a little bit different based on their residence halls. For example, at Rochester, they're all apartments, and so you don't have the same kind of desk management that one does in a residence hall. And so the particular implementation is going to differ a little by campus. I should note that Crookston, has already begun their classes. They began with a 9 p.m. curfew, and so we're learning a lot from them. A 9 p.m. stay-at-home order. We're learning a lot from them about how to implement. And just yesterday, my understanding is they moved from their step 1 to step 2 and extended the stay-at-home, the be-at-home by time to midnight.
Terrific. Regent Kenyana.
Yeah, I was just asking because I had the chance to speak with someone at UMD at least, and to my knowledge, there was no sign-in, and to my knowledge, also those facilities aren't and they don't have keycard access enabled. So I'm not sure how accurate that is for all the campuses. But to my original question, just a clarification, in the presentation, when we look at the different numbers for the total classes, we have in-person, blended, remote, and online. I just want a clarification between remote and online. What the differences between those two, and I'm sure we've heard it before, but that'd be helpful.
Vice Provost Croson. I asked the same question at one time, Regent Kenyana. Go ahead.
Chair Anderson, Regent Kenyana, thank you. Yes, so remote is distance but synchronous, which means the classes, all the students gather in a Zoom or equivalent room and the faculty members there at the same time. Online is distance but asynchronous. So you log on, you do your work, you come back. There may be some office hours or other kinds of things, but that's the main distinction.
Okay. The Regent answers, this is a remote meeting, not an online meeting.
Exactly.
Correct. You're absolutely correct. Okay. You get an A for the day. And I think I had Vice Chancellor Hoffman that wanted to, I think, tell us what's happening in Crookston with the dormitory situation. I saw him raise his hand. Is that correct?
Sure, I'll be brief, just in following up, and this to Regent Kenyana and Chair Anderson. Follow up on the question. There are some differences in implication or the application of the policy system-wide. It is looking different. So, for example, we did not use check-ins on our campus. I don't believe that is going to be the case at Duluth. Each of the campuses has a little bit different plan that fits the specifics of their campus.
Thank you. And I'm just going to chime in here. We've got no more speakers. I'm just going to chime in while Provost Croson gets ready for the next item, which will be the consent report. You know, we had a lot of discussion this summer about the meeting planning, and the goal was to limit the topics, have robust discussion and big topics. I think you can see today that, at least today, everybody got to be heard. We were not under time constraints. Hopefully that will continue to work. It was really, really good in my opinion. To my knowledge, we're at number 4 of the consent report. I think there are 4 categories of academic issues that need to be approved. Provost Croson, do you want to provide a little introduction on what they are, and then we'll look for a motion.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, Regents. The September consent report is before you. The list of new program proposals includes 3 new undergraduate minors. On the Twin Cities campus, the College of Continuing Professional Studies is creating an undergraduate minor in long-term care management. The College of Liberal Arts is creating an undergraduate minor in museum and curator studies. And on the Duluth campus, the College of Education and Human Service Professions is creating an undergraduate minor in developmental and adapted physical education. A summary of program changes, all on the Twin Cities campus, is included in your docket. Finally, there are 3 programmatic discontinuation requests. On the Twin Cities campus, the College of Continuing Professional Studies will discontinue the undergraduate interpreting certificate and the undergraduate minor in translation. On the Duluth campus, the Labovitz School of Business and Economics will discontinue the Bachelor of Business Analytics degree and undergraduate minor in Marketing Analytics as part of a program reconfiguration. In addition to these academic program changes, there are 2 medical school faculty members recommended for tenure and faculty rank, Professor Yibin Deng and Professor Laura Stowe. Chair Anderson, I recommend these changes and appointments to the Board of Regents.
I'm looking for a motion for the consent report at this time.
I'd make that motion.
Regent McMillan, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Regent Swigum, at least. The motion has been seconded. It's on the table. Any discussion about those items? And I believe because we are in a remote meeting, that Ms. Plotton will call a roll call vote. Thank you.
On the Mission Fulfillment Committee consent report, Regent Beeson.
Yes.
Regent Beeson votes yes. Regent Davenport. Regent Davenport is absent. Regent Herr. Regent Herr.
Yes.
Regent Herr votes yes. Regent Shu.
Yes.
Regent Shu votes yes. Regent Kenyanya.
Yes.
Regent Kenyanya votes yes. Regent Mayron.
Yes.
Regent Mayron votes yes. Regent McMillan.
Yes.
Regent McMillan votes yes. Regent Powell.
Yes.
Regent Powell votes yes. Regent Rocha.
Yes.
Regent Rocha votes yes. Regent Simonson.
Yes.
Regent Simonson votes yes. Regent Swigum.
Yes.
Regent Swigum votes yes. Chair Anderson.
Yes.
Chair Anderson votes yes. Mr. Chair, there are 11 yeses, 0 noes, and 1 absent.
Consent report passes 11 to 0, 1 absent. We'll move on now to the, what do we have left? We have, is there any discussion, not discussion items, just any informational items?
Yeah.
Thank you, Provost Croson.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, Board of Regents. The information items in your September docket is our regular report of select student, faculty, and staff accomplishments. As I mentioned in the June meeting, with all of our focus on the unprecedented changes due to COVID-19 and its impact on students, faculty, and staff, it's especially important to take a moment to note the continued efforts and accomplishments within the university community. Several examples of uplifting work, important research, and meaningful support of our local, state, and global communities are among this month's information items. I'll highlight just a few. A 5-year, $26 million NSF award to the University of Minnesota Institute for Engineering in Medicine and Surgery and collaborators to create the Engineering Research Center for Advanced Technologies for the Preservation of Biological Systems. David Reddish, Professor of Neuroscience, and Sofia Vinogradov, Department Head of Psychiatry, will lead a $15 million National Institute of Mental Health grant researching how to better treat psychosis. and a $1 million donation from the Otto Bremer Trust to establish mobile healthcare services in North Minneapolis and the Phillips neighborhood of South Minneapolis. Finally, I note the establishment of the George Floyd Memorial Scholarship in Law. A second item for this month's information report is an update concerning 2 recent regular accreditation reviews in the Twin City and Morris campuses. Both campuses were found to meet all 21 core competencies of the Higher Learning Commission's accreditation criteria, and we're delighted with that clean report. Chair Anderson, board members of the Board of Regents, that concludes the report.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, everybody. Been a long day, but that does conclude our meeting. Is there any, or I should say, are there any questions or anything? If not, we are going to conclude the meeting. Meeting adjourned.
You did it in 2 hours.
Hour early.
Hour early.